Hey everyone, Justin Adkins here, and today I'm really excited to be sharing with you a coloring tutorial using the Wizard's Apprentice stamp set by Kindred Stamps, part of their July 2023 release. Now, please keep in mind that I did speed up these coloring videos to about 4 times the speed of my actual coloring. With YouTube, you can always go in and change the coloring speed just to make sure that you are coloring along at a speed that works best for you. I would just recommend maybe turning the sound off so I don't sound like I'm all drawn out with my voice. But we're starting with the wizard that is included in the stamp set. I think this guy is just totally cute. I am starting with my skin tone blend using just kind of what I call my standard skin tone blend, which is going to be E04, E11, E21, E00, and E000. I'll talk about it a little bit more when I get to it, but of course I will be adding some blush to him as well. Now, for my skin tones, and really with all my colors, I'm going to be using the term double coloring because when I color using my Copic markers, I like to use this technique where I actually color up each of my sections twice. Doing this double coloring allows me to really saturate my paper with ink, getting a really nice deep color, but also by saturating that paper, it's allowing my alcohol marker ink to flow more evenly and get those great blends. Now, you don't have to use your double coloring technique if that's not something you want to do. I know some of us have different styles that work, but I love my double coloring just because it really helps with my blends. Now, going back to that blush, I am using some R22 and some R20 to get some nice rosy cheeks. When I'm done using those, I do blend it out using my E000. One little tip that I like to give when coloring is always do a once over before you move on to a new blend because you may find that you missed a little area here or there of your project that you want to make sure is all nice and colored. So I am moving on to his hair now. He's got a super just awesome white beard, white eyebrows, white mustache, and whenever I'm coloring in something that's white, I always like to give the advice of coloring it a little darker than what you want it to look like because when you're coloring white, you still want to capture those shadows, and you can use the white of the paper as a highlight, but for me, I started with some C4 for my shadow, and I'm just kind of building lighter from that. But because I am doing some hair, I'm using some strokes just to make sure you're getting all of those textures in there. And his beard is going to look a little darker at first. Keep in mind he is currently in uncolored garments, so the garments are the white of the paper, and they're going to be blue in a second. So once they're up against the blue, it's really going to give the illusion that his beard is a lot whiter, and you're going to get that same sort of white effect from that. What I also wanted to mention was he does have these little glasses, and usually I make it a point to color in my glasses. I like to usually use some BGs for that. However, I decided with him that I was just going to leave his glasses entirely void of any coloring. I figured that that would just make it easiest for him. He's kind of just got these little spectacles. Now that I've moved on to his garment, I'm starting by adding some B26 to the shadowed areas of this image, kind of keeping in mind anywhere that there might be a fold, that part of his body may be overlaying part of the garment, and I'm just kind of building out from that. I'm going to go in with some B24 next and begin the process of just sort of bringing out those shadows. When I say bringing out the shadow, I mean I lay a shadow base, and then each lighter color, I just start building it out, adding more, making sure that it's building towards whatever the center of the image is, and then the centermost part will give you a highlight. Now I just finished off using some B21, and now I'm going in with my final color of B000, and that's really going to give some lightness to his garment. I wanted to use lighter colors for the highlight here, or not go super dark really with the shadows, because I wanted to maintain a sense of light colorness with his garments, but still get a really nice blend. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and color up his garment twice. So I'm going in, re-adding in all of these colors, making sure to get a really great saturation going, adding that B24 to any areas to help bring out that shadow, and just keep on building those colors. Next, we're going to go in with that B21, draw it out a little bit more, and I love this blue. It's such a nice, just sort of soft blue for him. It's not super vibrant. That's kind of something that I wanted to stay away from, but it's just blue enough that I feel like it's really what I call true to character. I'm just making sure all of my areas are blended nicely, and then I can move on to the final portion of my image, which is his wand, which I'm just using a combination of some E3 markers. I wanted a little bit of warmth to the wand. It gives a nice warm wood sort of feel, and it's going to coordinate so well with him as an image. I like to go back in and make sure that all of my blends are nice, so I'm fixing that area of his hat with some B000, and my wizard is all complete. Next, we're going to go ahead and move on to this Wizard's Apprentice, and I'm going to use the exact same skin tone blend that I used for his Wizard Master, I guess we can call him, or his teacher, what mentor, whatever word you want to use. So this is the same skin tone blend that we used previously. I'll go ahead and list it again. It is E04, E11, E21, E00, E000, and I'll be using the same blush colors when we get to them of R22 and R20. Whenever I'm beginning my skin tones, I always end up starting at the hairline. It's always my number one space that I know that I need to add my E04 because just think about when your hair touches your face, there's always going to be that shadow on whatever part of your face it is, usually your forehead. But I mean, depending on what the hair is, it could be other areas as well. So I just want to make sure to start from there. And then, like I say, I build out that shadow using lighter and lighter colors, finding somewhere in the center is where my highlight is going to be. I also do find myself adding just a little bit of what I would call a lighter shadow to the chin area. I don't use the E04, but I'll typically go in with either my E11 or my E21 to finish out that border along the chin to give it a little bit of depth, but not make it super dark. I use my E000 after I lay down my blush as it helps blend that red blush into my skin tone so there's no sort of harsh lines. Now, his hair is pretty yellow. It's honestly almost like a cartoon hay colored of sorts. So I'm going in and I'm adding my E37. Now, this E37 is going to turn out to be a little bit of a saboteur later on because I realized my marker was a little on the dry side and I didn't fix it. But don't worry, I fixed it the best that I can when we get to it. I'm bringing out some E35, moving on to some Y38. I really love the Y3s. I don't reach for them enough, but they're probably the most orange yellow is what I'm trying to say. But even though they are still orangish, they are still in the yellow color family. So I'm just using those Y3s as the last bits of color for my hair. So now that I've laid all my color down once, I'm working in reverse order to add those strands of hair back in, starting with the Y35. Then I'm going to go in and add some Y38, just kind of giving those nice defined strokes of hair. I'll go in with some E35, which is really the unsung hero when it comes to adding shadows to your yellows. And this is where you're going to start to see in a second where I have my issue with my E37. If you ever notice one of your markers getting dry, I highly recommend refilling it or doing any sort of testing on it before you use it on your project and possibly end up with an area you're not satisfied with. Because, like for me with this hair, I end up doing a little bit too dark over above his ear, and I try to correct it with some E35 and some Y38, and it just ends up looking a little muddled. In the end, it really is fine. It's not exactly how I would love for it to turn out, but it works. I move on to his garment yet, which is mostly all just sort of nice red colors. I start with some R39 as my shadow, and then next I go ahead and move on to some R29. I just do that same process of bringing out the shadow, and he's really starting to take form right now. You're starting to really see what his garments are going to look like, and I think he's just turning out super adorable. We use some R24, and now we're going to use some R22, and that is going to be the highlight color for his main part of his cloak and shoes. I'm going to color twice, going back to my shadow color and just bringing some definition to those shadowed areas, and I begin the process of drawing them out again. Now, one little note about using red markers that other colorists will tell you as well It's not the greatest color to use the zero colorless blender with. There's something about it being a red marker that it just doesn't fully like to get erased or pushed back in with that zero colorless blender. So keep that in mind when you're coloring. Sometimes it's just easier to go ahead and use a white gel pen to fix any areas outside of their bounds. Now he does have some red-orange areas of his cloak that I go in with some R14, R12, and R11. And I'm also going to go in now and start working on his scarf, which is a yellow color, and I'm making sure to use some different yellows than what I used for his hair. So I'm doing some E35, Y19, Y15, and some Y11. This is my standard go-to yellow blend. It's a great set of markers to have in your stash if you don't have it already. Now it's time to start working on the rock that he's going to be pulling the sword out of. So I'm using some warm grays. We're starting with some W7, moving to W5, then W3, and finishing off the stone with W1. And I'm just sort of adding the shadow at the very bottom of each stone and building towards the bottom up. And after we go ahead and we add all of the coloring with the stone, we also are just going to add a little bit of cool gray. So I'm using C2 and C0 to the snow cap part of the stone as well. I really love that this image has some wintry feels to it. I think it'd be really great to use for any sort of a holiday project. So keep that in mind with your project choices as well. I'm using some darker cool grays for the metal part of the sword blade. I wanted to make it look a little different in color than what we did for the snow caps on the rock. And we're going to finish off with some yellow markers for the gold handle of the sword. We're using some Y2 colors to really get that nice gold blend going. Now, once I'm all finished with the markers, I go in with some gel pen to correct some areas, and he is all completed. So now that we can move on to our third image, who I'm calling our magical mistress, I am going to be using that same color blend. Of course, I'll list it again for you. We're going to be using for the skin tone color blend, it's going to be E04, E11, E21, E00, E000, and then our blush blend of R22 and R20. I always love when we get a villain added to a stamp set. It's probably my favorite part. I know that the Kindred Stamps Villainous stamp set is one of my all time favorites because I know it has some of the OG villains, as we would call them, ready to go for all your crafting needs. So I always love when we're getting a new villain added to the lineup. So I'm really excited to see this magical mistress added for us. She also has some really fun colors that we're going to get to. She's got this blue violet hair, and then she also has a garment that's a mix of some pinks and some purples and some reddish pinks. I mean, pink is already red as it is, but some pinks are a little bit more red in appearance than others. So I'm going to get her skin tone all ready to go, and once I'm done with that, I'm going to work with the inside of her mouth. I like to use a blend of pinks or red violets when it comes to the inside of my characters' mouths. I just think that it looks really nice on their images. Once I'm done correcting that area of her skin, I move on to her hair. And I came up with a really fun purple color blend using some blue violet colors. And I start with some BV17, and this is going to be my shadow. So I'm going in, I'm adding my darkest strokes to the hair, and then I move into some BV13. And you're going to begin seeing her hair really lighten up. And I'm also going to be changing color families in a second, or rather color groupings, into another group of the blue violets. So we're going to move into the BV02 next, and I'm just drawing those strokes further out. I really love using the blue violets for the different stamp sets. There was another image from the Swamp Sidekicks. There's a fairy included in that. I used a very similar hair color for her as well, and it pops so nicely. It's also a great color to go ahead and add a little bit of glitter into if you want to, or if you have any sort of pixie dust items of that in your craft stash, you'll be able to go ahead and add that into this hair, and it just really makes it look even more magical. I'm finishing it off with some BV17 and really giving those nice defined darker strokes. And I think her hair is my favorite part of this image entirely. Once I go in, I use some lighter BB colors just to go ahead and correct the different areas of her hair. And then I'm able to move on to the next portion of her image, which is going to be her, probably we'll call it her shirt and her shoes, because she has like an undershirt and an overshirt. So I'm using a combination of some V markers. We're using V28, V25, V22, and V20, and they're really just going to give a nice sort of dusty purple feel to her shirt. I still don't know what to fully call it. We'll call it an overshirt, I guess, and her shoes. Next, we're going to use some RV markers for her undershirt and for her leggings. I'm using a combination of RV69, RV66, and RV63, and these are going to give a really nice reddish pink color to those areas. Once I have those all blended out with my RV63 marker, I can then move on to my next area, which is going to be her skirt, which is a very red pink. I'm using my RV2s, probably the most red of the RV family. I'm using a combination of RV29, RV25, RV23, and then I'm also going to go ahead and use some RV21 as well. And we're just going to capture that skirt. I tried to add a little bit of detail as well to get some folds in her skirt, and it's really turning out nice and pretty. I love these colors when it comes to this little magical mistress's skirt, and I love how they all coordinate together. So let's go ahead and finish this off. We're going to use some RV11 and RV10 for the puffy part of her leggings, and our magical mistress is going to be entirely completed. Now this owl sidekick is going to be our final image to color up. I do go in, I know I'm starting with some E59. I go in and add a darker color on my second go around of coloring, but right now I'm starting with that E59. I'm adding in some E57. I'm going to then go in and add some E55 as well. As you can see, I'm kind of coloring up the different areas of him in steps, so some of them are going to be darker than others. I'm also going to add some E53 and then finish him off with some E51. But he looks a little pale right now, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce that E49, and then I'm going to resume my normal colors that I was doing and just sort of darken up each of those areas. I will let you know, even for me, this little guy is a really quick color up. I think in total he took me less than 6 minutes to fully color up. So keep in mind, with this video being 4 times the speed, you're going to see me color him up in less than 2 minutes. We'll say about it, somewhere between a minute and a half and 2 minutes. But I kind of love when there's little images that you can color up really quickly. It's a great excuse to add some extra characters to your card. We're going to color up his beak and his feet with some YR27, YR24, and YR21, and then he is going to be all ready to go for our cards. Now this does bring us to the end of our coloring tutorial for the Wizard's Apprentice stamp set. The Wizard's Apprentice stamp set will release with all of the other new July 2023 items on the Kindred Stamps website on July 28th at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. Thank you so much for stopping by my blog today. Make sure to like and subscribe, and also use the affiliate links below to shop the latest Kindred Stamps release. Thank you guys so very much once again, and happy crafting! Goodbye.